Facebook is now 20 years old, and in the world of technology, that seems like ancient history. OpenAI and the generative AI revolution feels like it's the next big thing, but this has us wondering where innovation in the 2020s will come from. Next up on Today in Tech, we're going to discuss where future breakthroughs will happen. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Today in Tech. I'm Keith Shaw. Joining me on today's show is Chris Shaw. He is the CMO for NTT Research. Welcome to the show, Chris. And we are not related as far as we know, correct?
As far as we know, yes. Good to be here. Thank you, Keith.
Before we start jumping, tell me a little bit about what NTT Research does, what you guys, what you do specifically, and a little bit about the history of the company, because it's part of a bigger organization, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So NTT Research is a fundamental research lab in Sunnyvale, California. We launched about 5 years ago, and it's the basic research arm of NTT Group, NTT Corporation of Japan, a large multinational IT services company that has, originally, way back when, you would call them a telecom.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of hard to call anyone a telecom anymore.
I remember they were they part of NTT Docomo at one point? That was one of the big cell phone.
Kind of the other way. Yeah. There's NTT, and then Docomo is actually part of NTT.
Okay.
So it's similar to something like AT&T, back in the day. It was the Japanese, telephone company. So in the same way that where AT&T used to be. So, but, with the advent of just, the internet technology, it's in IT services, primarily IT services, data centers. So much different than, I would never refer to us as a telecom. It seems strange to me, but,
okay.
In the days of landlines, yes, but not anymore.
So if you guys, you said 5 years ago that it was formed?
5 years ago, NTT Research in the US was formed.
Right.
We have laboratories in Japan that have been around for years.
Yeah. Okay. And what was the feeling of why they wanted to develop this, this U.S. branch or this U.S. version?
We're even though we're Japanese based, we're a global corporation, and we have quite a bit of companies outside of Japan. We have NTT Data Inc., which is primarily all of the work outside of Japan in IT services. And so with that, it was establishing a research sort of beachhead here in the States, and in Silicon Valley, it made sense. We have 2,500 plus researchers in Japan, 4 to 5 very large laboratories around the country, the equivalent of almost like a university. And so, we having something over here just made a lot of sense.
Okay. And I think before the show we were talking, you compared it to the old days of Bell Labs in the AT&T telecom world. For those of you old enough to remember Bell Labs, that was a lot of the innovations that you see today around the internet and telecommunications and communication came out of Bell Labs research. So is it a similar kind of goal and mindset and strategy that you're developing research that not necessarily will become commercialized, or there's not a commercialized end goal? Is it more just about the research and finding where technology can go?
So I would change that a little bit. Yeah. There's definitely a commercialized end goal, but maybe not specific to a certain thing. So for example, Bell Labs, they developed the transistor, right? Which became the semiconductor we know today. Mm-hmm. Now they knew that you'd go from tubes to semiconductor to a transistor. They could see where it was going to take the company, but they didn't necessarily know when that would happen. And that it would, what it was going to, we get the internet, all of those things came out of that, massive computational power.
Right.
So in the same sense, the work that we're doing, it's fundamental research that's trying to understand how things work. So, if you want to talk about the fundamental research around physics or cryptography, those are some of the areas we're working in. We have a strong focus in photonics, so light-based computation, and so there is a goal to get to, photonic-based computing.
Right.
But to get there, there's a lot of things that will happen and that we'll learn along the way, and that could, in fact, create new technologies, but we don't even know about.
Okay. Now, is this similar to what you might find at academic institutions where...
Very.
Okay, so it does have a very... I don't like the word collegial, but I guess I'll use it. Does it have an academic feel to it?
It's different from the sort of pure academic research, but what is similar is you have researchers who are doing work and writing papers, and as opposed to, it's different than applied research. So take something like, like a company, let's use Procter and Gamble, for example, right? Mm-hmm. They have an R&D arm that's been around for 100 years, and it is focused on applied research around the products that they make. Great innovations around soap, which we need, right?
Sure.
And it is technology, and they have,
that was one of my questions later. So go ahead. Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, I'm just giving that as an example because theirs are they're focused in those areas. Similarly, our research is still focused around technology and communications, right? I mean, we do much of our company is infrastructure, right? Data centers, undersea cables, all of those things. So it certainly is advancing all of that. If you think about, I'm going to sort of go down a path here a little bit, but think about just, wireless communication, 1G, 2G, or sort of 2G, 3G, LTE, now we're talking 5G, 6G, all of those things. Those are just new evolutions of, in some ways, the same goal, but completely different technologies.
Right.
So that's how I kind of look at what we do.
If you look back at the last 10 to 20 years, just within the time frame, let's talk about from 2000 on to the present day. Do you feel like technology innovation has been getting better or worse? Is it still on the same path? Do you see innovation coming from different pockets? And again, we could talk about the social media stuff. It felt like the last 20 years to me has always been about startups in Silicon Valley getting a lot of money and then hyping it up and coming out with that minimally viable product and then taking it off and becoming billionaires. Whereas maybe before 2000s, it was a different mindset and a feel. Do you feel like we're still in that era, or because of what you saw with OpenAI, that we might be entering a new era of innovation?
I think we're entering a new era.
Okay.
I think that the era of the large industrial labs like Bell Labs, I think sort of faded away, in the late 70s, 80s as they broke up AT&T. Mm-hmm. That shifted. You started to see, then with the advent of the internet and on quite a bit happening in home computing, Microsoft, Apple, all of that. And then really the big push in Silicon Valley for, the sort of the startups that we saw post .com, right? The .com, that I think was really more of an anomaly because it was jumping into what was new. But I think what we saw after that was much different. The social media, Web 2.0, all those things. I think the difference, and I think OpenAI and what Google is doing, I think the whole AI revolution is a new era. And for a couple of reasons. I think the way that OpenAI was built, when they started that, it was primarily, they didn't have a path to revenue or product.
Right.
It was scientists learning about how can we do this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was a not-for-profit. Now they have two arms, but it took them years to really say, what are we actually, how are we going to make revenue on this thing, right? Now they're charging $19 a month or something like that.
I just got into this. Yeah, I just got in and got my subscription, so I'm part of the crew that's paying them now.
Yeah. So, but they didn't know. So, and I think what's fascinating about AI, and we're just at the beginning, but I think it's going to unlock quite a bit. I think we're going to see, new technologies that people are going to build on it and advance that I think will be positive advances as long as they stay. If we can stay away from advertising model, I think we're okay.
Right. If you then believe that, where are there pockets of companies or groups or organizations where this might come from? Again, will it come from a lab and research development like what you have, or is it going to come from academics? Is it going to come from corporate?
I think it's truly all of the above, and I know that sounds like a cop-out.
It does,
but I know. But I'll tell you why. I mean, I think that because it's so broad and open for people to try things, that I think in many ways with what we saw was sort of Web 2.0, right, where people just started experimenting and building things, and I think we'll see some of that. There will be the labs that like what we're doing, and there's technology that we're developing that will use AI. There are some of our groups that are developing like a biodigital twin, for example.
Right.
That I think will ultimately AI will be a part of it. Now, 2 years ago, it wasn't necessarily part of the equation, but it's here. So how can it not be? This idea of making things that were scarce available to people, like certain medical care, I think that AI will play a huge role in that. But then you're going to have, students who are playing around and they have access to it. You just said you signed up, right?
Right.
I'm signed up to it. I could start to play around and get some ideas and maybe come up with some new technology using it that, that I don't know if that's going to be a breakthrough or not, but that's why I think it's going to go across the board.
Yeah. What impressed me about the OpenAI subscription once when I got in was not just that I got in, but more, wow, there's a lot of apps that have already been developed from other third parties, and they're highly specific. So there was one app that could make a Pixar-like cartoon of my face. And then there was another one that was like, hey, we'll design a logo for you if you just describe in your brain what you want, and then you can tweak it from there. There's all sorts of writing ones and organization ones and athletic training programs, for example, if you want a better workout. So there's lots of things that the third parties, not just, we've written articles on this and you've seen a lot of articles about all the things you could do with ChatGPT, but to see them in an app form was pretty impressive. So again, maybe some new companies will be developed out of that, or some new directions will happen from there. I think that's kind of a cool thing.
Absolutely. It's like the App Store, right? When it kind of took off, and some things will work, some things won't. You might have 20 apps doing what you were just describing.
Sure.
And I think that's okay. I think you want the competition. You don't have to have, a winner take all situation.
Yeah.
But it definitely opens up a lot. It's exciting. Do you have
a good pipeline with the academic community for whatever areas of research you're doing?
We do.
Because when I was covering robotics a few years ago, I spoke with a professor of robotics at Carnegie Mellon University. And one of the big things that he was seeing was that all of his students that were coming out through either the master's degree program or the PhD program, in the olden days, it could have been like 10 years ago, but in the old days, they would stick around and continue their fundamental research. And the university would support them. But then he saw that within the last 10 to 15 years, a lot of these people just wanted to jump into that commercialization business route. Is that still a problem where you have a lot of people that have great ideas and they're like, I just want to cash in and make a lot of money off of this to see if I can become the next Mark Zuckerberg or the next, name your tech guru?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a problem, but I think it's definitely true that there are, those that want to leave. We certainly bring in, PhDs and they come into our company, but because we're fundamental and we have a lot of, open lab agreements with, we've got Harvard and MIT and Stanford, to name a few, that we're working with.
Yeah.
And we have, so it's a little different for us, but it's still, they're leaving, and it's not academic, right? It's you're working for an industrial lab. And then you get the people who leave to go to a startup because they wrote a paper that's a new invention based on that paper and someone wants to fund it. You kind of can't blame them, right? To give it a shot.
I suppose if someone's holding a big giant bag of money with a dollar sign on it, you have to at least take the offer, or at least consider it.
There was a time back. This goes way back, but I went to Cal back in the 80s, and our arch rival was Stanford. And I remember one of the football players left early, and I don't remember who it was, but to go play in the NFL. And the comment he said was, I went to school to get a good job. This is the good job.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think some of these guys, that happens. Look, you get an offer and you're gonna try to you get support. We have people who are going back. They'll come in to us and then they'll go back and they get actually tenure track positions at universities. So I think it's going to be sort of this virtuous cycle.
Okay.
I would hope.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And you mentioned the whole soap example with Procter and Gamble, for example. And I don't mean to pick on them just because they just came to mind. I'm trying to think of a company that's not necessarily tech focused, but still having R&D departments. Do you still see that with a lot of corporate companies, or is the R&D group kind of going away in the corporate world?
I think it still exists in the applied sense. There's always going to be that. But you think about more new product development. Procter's a unique company. They've had R&D forever.
Sure.
They spend a lot. They spend, I think, around $2 billion on R&D. So it's a lot of money. But I think everywhere you have to have some type of, we'll call it new product development, which is what R&D is, to the extent of it being like a large expenditure. I don't think it's that way anymore, other than some very large companies, the auto manufacturers, things like that. You're going to see it. You have to have it. But the basic research and the kind of things that we're doing and the old Bell Labs did, that's pretty rare. That's going to be university, government, and then kind of us and some smaller places.
That's true. Yeah, you mentioned government. I don't think we've mentioned that yet, that they provide a lot of funding for a lot of these types of programs. And I'm wondering, is that something that gets frowned upon in the space, or they're like, oh no, we really need government funding? I mean, I guess if it's the defense, the Defense Department, probably there's some issues probably around.
It's interesting because, so many of the great innovations that have come out are the direct result of government funding, right? And DARPA, which is defense. Originally, It was not defense, but they put that in there. So the internet was a result of that, right? Originally ARPANET, and then DARPA takes over. A lot of the things that happen in terms of the moon launch, GPS, all those things, and that's government funded.
Yeah, even the robotics the robotics challenges in the mid 2000s were all DARPA funded for self-driving cars and some of the robotics autonomy stuff that you're seeing now.
And remember that, when you think of the Defense Department, people will jump to say, we're working with the Defense Department. A lot of that is things like the VA, right? Those types of things. It's not the Defense Department and the government is not all about, okay, we're looking at how to make some kind of new weapons or something. I think that's where people go. But a lot of it is, a fair amount is healthcare and other technologies that then come into our world because they can do things and create new products or test new things in a way that can't be done in the private sector. Right.
Now, yeah. Isn't that one of you would see stories and articles around all of the innovations that were developed for NASA to get people to the moon, would then, once they got back from the moon, they were like, well, we can use this on Earth. And, what was it? It's like the Plantronics, the company that did a lot of those Bluetooth headsets. Yeah. They were born out of the space race. And then there's another, what's the material? It's a Teflon? No, not Teflon.
Yeah. I think Teflon might be. I don't know.
What is it?
Oh, Velcro. Yeah.
And Pyrex, my director's telling me, the Tempur-Pedic mattress, I guess, was developed. Memory foam. All these things were developed from the space program. So again, that's maybe I have an issue maybe with government funding, or I've talked to people that have had those types of issues.
I think it depends. Again, it depends on what the funding is going towards, and any company is going to know what kind of money they're taking and what it's for.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not like there's a government contract and you're working on something that you don't know potentially where that's going. So, and I think like anything with any innovation, or anything creative, which is what innovation is, there's something that's going to be derivative of what you've learned in the past, right? So to have government, small entrepreneurs coming up with new ideas, large corporations, open sourcing things is just that's how creativity happens, right? And it happens in sort of the intersections.
So open source research is a very positive thing in the space, or do you?
Absolutely.
I guess when open source first was being discussed, there was a lot of I don't want to say fear, but there was a little cautious optimism, I guess, around it. But there's none of that now. It's very collaborative and very open.
I think there's both. So I think it's open, and there are definitely companies that do open source work. Some of our teams do, but then you have other companies that are very closed ecosystems. They don't want anyone in, and that's fine. I think you're going to have better innovation with open source, right? And people I would say like what's happening with ChatGPT is great open source. They're giving people access to build on it, and that's where we're going to get something interesting. If you're just trying to hoard money and keep it as a sort of closed system,
right?
Good for the shareholders of certain companies, but is it really great for humanity?
Sure. Okay, and then we talked a little bit about this idea of the minimally viable product before, and it feels like that's where a lot of software development has gone, and a lot of apps. But you see this in hardware as well. Is that a good thing or a bad thing when it comes to innovation? Because it feels like in the old days, if you were inventing something, you'd want to have a product that worked and was really good, and you didn't have to iterate on this. Versus now where it's like you get that minimum, and then you're like, well, I know that 3 versions down it'll be really good.
I think that I have some issue with the idea of a minimum viable product, because I think that sometimes it's not quite where it should be and it's clunky. But I think the concept of saying, let's get something out there and see if it works is not a bad idea. It's just that I think they give up too soon. And sometimes the reality is it's just going to take time.
Yeah.
Things take time. And if you put something out there and the big search is what's the product market fit? Product market fit is just all about timing, right? It's just, you build something, and was Facebook the first social network? Not even close.
Right.
Everything happened at the right time for them. They kind of had a minimum viable product, I guess, but the stars aligned. So I think there's a logic to the minimum viable product, but I think that it lends itself to giving up too soon.
But right, especially in this media market that we now live in with social media, where it feels like everything has to be either an instant hit or an instant stink. Like it's either one or the other. There's no room for 3 stars anymore. It's either 1 or 5.
Right. Are you going to take over the market, or are you going to be nothing? Are you just going to be like a lifestyle company? That's the term that I hate. Maybe $100 million company that's supporting quite a few people is considered a lifestyle company, but they want dominance. So yeah.
I just don't. I think if I was looking to invent something, I don't know if I would be in favor of this minimally viable product, because again, I would be fearful of this. Well, as soon as I come out with this, people are going to be like, oh, this stinks, and then you'll never get a second look at it. Whereas if you wait. And we see this in video games, for example, where if you wait and develop and just bring it out next year. But there's so much pressure from investors too. I guess
that's where most of it, I think, comes from. And I think you have to see, will people pay for it, right? Whatever you're making, is someone going to buy the thing? If you're selling, you make a new soda pop, is someone going to drink that? So that's your minimum viable. But it doesn't mean you could come out with something and just because they don't take the first sip, you can say, oh, maybe I need to make it more bubbly or whatever it is. Right. And people just don't do that second step. That's the problem.
Do you have so with the research that goes on at NTT, do you have this? Do you have these procedures in place where you're looking at something and going, okay, we're at this phase within this research, or does that not how
we
it
do?
Works?
No, we do. It's a little bit different, but we do. So we have, for example, a technology that was developed by the head of our cryptography lab, that he had this invention, this concept in a paper back in 2005. It just went to market like a year ago, where it's a commercial product, and it's in a couple of POCs, so proof of concept. It's being used and it's being paid for.
Right.
So that's almost a 20-year time frame.
That's almost never heard of these days, right?
Well, I think it is really heard of, because ChatGPT, you could argue it's the same thing, because they didn't come up with the idea of AI. They were 4 years before they had anything.
Yeah.
But you go back to the history of this, it's a long time to get there.
Okay.
So I think, and what we do have that, where we see something that, okay, it's at a point, we've proven this thing can work. We're building prototypes. Let's try and commercialize it. So we definitely do that.
Okay. Is there a place for this almost sounds nostalgic or mythic, is there still a place in the world for 2 people in a garage? The whole Hewlett Packard guys, the whole Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak building Apple Computer in a garage in Silicon Valley. Is that still a dream, or is it now just something that's like the world of myths and legends in today? Where do the next big innovators come from, in your opinion?
Yes, there's absolutely room. I can tell you there are some guys working for us that came in. Out of Stanford, one of them had an incredible idea around a new photonics device that they're working on now, and it was a few people in a lab. Now we're supporting it in the same way that 2 people in a garage. The Apple Computer guys, they're in a garage. They also got funding. They didn't do it by themselves.
Right.
right? They're not self-made. And so I think the same thing with Hewlett Packard. I mean, yes, the garage or wherever they built their first thing, the same thing with someone in a lab or in their home, like building or going on ChatGPT and creating an app. And then maybe someone says, oh, I see something, or I want to fund it. We can build a company with it. So I don't see why it wouldn't continue to happen.
But what we have now are the resources out there for investors and entrepreneurs are so much different than it was back in that day, right? Like,
yes.
if you had so let's say I'm Doc Brown and I've invented a time machine. I wouldn't necessarily kind of build it in my garage and let Marty drive it. Oh my God, we're just going down a really bad rabbit hole.
Let's go there.
But he would drive it up to some angel investor firm on Sand Creek Road?
Sand Hill Road.
Sand Hill Road. Yeah. Like, would he go the Silicon Valley route, or would he take it to where you guys are, or would he go down to Facebook and go, hey, forget this metaverse stuff, I have a time machine now? Like, where would the future inventors kind of?
I'm seeing both. I'm seeing people who are building things and putting them out there themselves, and then also the ones who are chasing the money. Obviously there's a huge ecosystem of investors in the Silicon Valley, and but I think there's a lot of play to win there, like win it all, be the dominant force, as I was saying. And I think maybe you're getting a few people who are building things that maybe they think can work without the massive investment.
Yeah.
But so, yeah, I mean, you still have both. It's just, it's a little more of an ecosystem now in terms of the investors than it used to be, but it's still someone who came up with the idea.
Yeah. Are you excited about the next 10 years in terms of what you're seeing?
I am super excited.
Are you optimistic or pessimistic?
It depends on which thing you're talking about. But most things, I'm actually very excited. I mean, because of the world that I'm in and the technology that I'm seeing develop just within NTT Research.
Yeah.
I'm very hopeful. And I also think it's interesting how things align. Like, as I said, we have our big push is around optical computing. So in NTT in Japan, there's this thing called IOWN, which is the Innovative Optical and Wireless Network. So it's a fully, a different internet, an optical internet. And we've been pushing that. We obviously do AI, but then you have, suddenly the AI boom. Well, is it going to be sustainable in electrical systems? I don't think so. I mean, the amount of compute that it's going to take. So that's going to push these things that may in fact then help something like climate change, right? Because if we go to all optical, maybe it's 20, 30 years away to get there, but it changes the energy use, the heat that comes off of it, everything about data centers will change. And I think something like AI is going to force it, because we need that compute power. We can't, we can't handle it with the current systems. But it's going to force it to happen faster, and we'll probably use AI to create some of the new technologies, right? It will help us learn faster. It'll help us get there. So I am very optimistic.
Okay. I was going to ask you if you had any other projects that you were excited about. It sounds like this photonic computing stuff.
The photonic is huge.
Without giving away any of your projects or products.
I mean, that's a big thing for us. And I think, and that's exciting for me, because the idea of, I like to call it like the Internet of Light, going from an all electronics system to an all photonic system. Right now we have it obviously in the, the fiber optics that's there, but we're talking switches, the computation, all of that ultimately getting there. We're a ways away. But as I said, maybe with some of the things we're developing and then some of the new AI technologies, where I could have said we're 20 or 30 years away 2 years ago, maybe it's 10, 15. Just because those things might just align.
Right. When you looked at what OpenAI was doing and the amount of attention it got, but the amount of enthusiasm that it got from a general public, I mean, the media loves this stuff because again, it's just stories, it's topics, it's things to talk about, good and bad. Were you surprised by either the speed of this or the amount of attention it got? Again, you're in the space, you were developing your a lot of AI stuff on your own. Like what was surprising to you about what OpenAI has been able to do?
I I would be lying if I said I wasn't surprised.
Yeah.
Because I think we all were in terms of how fast it happened. You know, it's sort of that classic, you know, when did you go broke, Mr. Hemingway? Very slowly, then all of a sudden, right? So it was here, and then people started using it. And I think it was just the quick adoption, which was incredible.
Yeah.
I think I would liken it in a much better way, but how fast social media kind of grew, right? When Facebook went from the university sort of platforms to opening to, you know, your grandmother's now on Facebook, that was pretty darn quick, that growth. And I think this is just a technology that is light years beyond something like, you know, sharing on a social network. And
Right.
So I was surprised at how quickly, but once it got going, you're like, okay, that makes sense.
And then you can see even it's still happening. For example, OpenAI just released their Sora video. Well, they announced it. They didn't release it.
Yeah.
They announced their Sora video text prompt generation type thing. And you looked at it and you went, wow, this, you know, it's because 6 months ago you're watching AI video and it's all like amorphous blobs and nightmare fuel type things. And now it's like, oh, this is actually stuff that could be used at some point. I'm hoping that they figure out the parts where people won't be able to do horrible things with it, but who knows if that's going to happen.
I mean, I think with any technology, there's that, you know, there's both. I mean, you think about, you know, nuclear power, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, there's the good and the bad.
Yeah.
I would hope that we've learned from social media of what we did wrong there, that maybe with, you know, we can't count on necessarily the tech companies to say, yeah, we're going to do a good job. We got to have some regulation.
Just trust us.
There.
Trust us. We'll get it right this time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Chris Shaw, thanks again for joining us on the show. Some great topics to talk about. We'd love to have you back. In fact, we're thinking of having you as a guest co-host on one of our News Roundup shows. So
Sounds wonderful.
You haven't seen the last of you yet, right?
Thanks, Keith. Good to see you.
All right.
Cousin Keith.
Yeah. Thank you.
Take care.
All right, that's all the time we have for today's episode. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, add any thoughts you have below. Join us every week for new episodes of Today in Tech. I'm Keith Shaw. Thanks for watching.